You literally have the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida saying Web3 is the new form of capitalism. You have in Korea 10 of the 15 largest game studios all building active Web3 games or experiences.
And then you also said there's a 10x opportunity. I personally think at scale, it might be closer to 100x.
We've come a long way in now becoming the default platform for Web3 games.
On this channel, you understand that crypto gaming is something I believe is so early and so big that it's like buying Ethereum at $1. Today, we have back on the channel the co-founder of Immutable, a project widely considered one of the biggest and most important pieces of gaming infrastructure in the entire crypto industry. And he's gonna share with you an update on the video we made a few months back where he explains exactly when we think we're gonna see the first massive gaming hit here in crypto land. And it's not just vague hypium here. This man came prepared and he brought his receipts. So do me a favor, destroy that like button and get ready for an awesome journey into what's going on right now with crypto gaming with Robbie from Immutable. Now, as always, transparency, I am an investor in Immutable X, Robbie's project. Just wanna make sure everybody knows I hold a position, and I always make sure to make that abundantly clear when I discuss my own positions here on this channel. So if you love the transparency, go ahead, double smash that like button and let's jump in. Welcome back to the channel, Robbie from Immutable X. As you guys all know, I'm an investor in Immutable X, and I've been following this project for a very long time. Robbie, it's so good to have you back on the show. Our last interview absolutely went crazy, and I know the audience is just dying to hear from you again. Thank you for coming back.
Of course, Elliot. Great to be back here.
So let's start off. What's going on with gaming as a whole? I think we should just start with a quick intro. If there are the uninitiated, why are you working in the gaming space in crypto before we get into the nitty gritty?
Absolutely. So I've been a gamer all my life. Spent far too much time playing League of Legends growing up and RuneScape. And in fact, the first startup I ever built more than a decade ago now with my brother was a League of Legends betting platform where you could essentially wager on your own matches. And I remember playing RuneScape when I was a kid, and my brother and I shared an account, which was against terms of service. But we basically, one day I took all of his best dragon armor, I took it into the wilderness, I scaled myself. If you don't know what that means, it basically means I put all the assets at risk by attacking another player, and I lost it all. And I felt terrible. So I took all of my pocket money and I went and I purchased gold on the internet to buy all his dragon armor back. 2 days later, the account was banned for real world trading. 6 months later, RuneScape rolls out real world trading as a primary service that they offer and that they monetize. And so I think it was pretty clear early on the value that assets could have and the meaning they could have to players and the raw deal that they were getting by the existing system. And I think there was a much better way. That way was not clear until 2017, where the first ever NFT came out. And it was pretty clear that NFTs represented the opportunity to take the $80 billion back then, now it's $150 billion, spent on in-game items every year. This is not the ability to play games. The vast majority of gaming monetization today is purchasing in-game assets. And players get almost zero value for it. In fact, in games like Counter-Strike Go, they trade literally $12 billion of skins per year. Valve makes nearly $2 billion off that on a 15% clip. And they regularly do things like trade lock assets, so make them only tradable once per week. When they did that back in 2018, Opskins, a third-party marketplace worth a few $100 million, went belly up. Players lost billions of dollars of value and billions of hours of time invested in the value of these assets. So it's pretty clear that unlike pretty much every other category of crypto, apart from payments, which was highly speculative, people were saying one day people might use DEXs as a future form of Forex. One day people might use, DeFi or Compound as a future form of collateralization and loans. And I'm enormous fans of those projects. I think they're going to change the world one day. But they ultimately require some thesis about the future. If you're looking at $150 billion spent every year and players getting $0 of it, it's incredibly simple to think, well, hey, giving them the ability to sell this stuff later on is immediately a 10x value proposition. So that's how we started. We started by building the first ever multiplayer game on a blockchain that came out in December 17. And from there, we basically started scaling really aggressively. We're now 300 people across the world. We have more than 4 years of runway. We've raised more than $300 million US. And as this recent Polygon partnership, we have 70% of all Web3 games in the world building on Immutable.
I mean, some insane stats there, and we'll dig into the Immutable stuff at the end. But you said something really big there, which I think underlines the sort of core thesis that I've had and why I've been so into Web3 gaming since about 2018 when I saw all the other sectors clear out, is that there's no fundamental hypothesis here that needs to be tested. We know that the consumers like to buy and sell digital stuff in this world. Other places, not so much, we don't know. But here we do know. And there's a dollar figure and it's recurring and it's compounding and growing. And then you also said there's a 10x opportunity. I personally think at scale, it might be closer to 100x because of like the blood magic of when you open up, truly decentralized trading systems. But how big does that make this market? If you have 100 billion, my rough pencil math was that I think gaming on the blockchain reaches $10 trillion in the next sort of 10 years. Maybe I'm crazy for that, but how big do you think the gaming market can grow to in the next 10 years?
It depends how you define that. But if you're including the volumes that could exist on, say, secondary derivative products, on index funds, I think you're probably within an order of magnitude of what I would say, certainly $1 trillion. And that's not a crazy number, because if you look at financial systems, any secondary market with sufficient volume gets derivatives or index funds or products built on top of it that are typically an order of magnitude larger than the actual underlying spot trading of the assets. So I think it's pretty clear there's going to be an entire financial ecosystem. I'm pretty convicted that there'll be trading desks, maybe at Goldman Sachs, that'll be trading digital asset skins in 10 or 15 years. I think these things always take longer than we think, but you typically overestimate what you can achieve in a year and underestimate what you can achieve in a decade. It's now nearly 6 years since we started. I think we've seen a radical amount of investment in this category, right? 15 billion USD in the last 2-3 years. There's absolutely a bear market in terms of funding right now. Despite that, $600 million US was still invested into Web3 games last quarter. We're still seeing top tier games funded just at lower valuations. So I think the amount of capital that's been put into this industry has outpaced any other major gaming shift. It's way more than what was invested into mobile gaming, way more than social. And I think it's pretty clear that there's going to be games that will be hits. The question is when. The good news is we track every single game and any single game not on immutable meticulously through our accelerations team. We know when all of them are going live. I would say with very high conviction, we're going to have multiple hits next year. And a hit being, I probably define as like a million active traders in these games. So it's not like Call of Duty Warzone level hit, but we are meaningfully mainstream, and we are shifting how the validity of this thesis is going to be received by any mainstream gamer.
Yeah, I love that. And, last time you came on the channel, obviously everyone on this channel who's been following my content knows we're missing the hit, right? That's the way I've been saying, we're missing a hit. But you actually came on the channel and you spoke to something that I think is really good, which is a framework here. And I know the audience is sick and tired of waiting. I'm sick and tired of waiting. Why isn't it here already? And of course, that moment in 2021 where all these games exploded in market cap was not actually driven by users in the games. This was driven by the concept for the first time ever really being understood at a market-wide level and just validated with a single title, and that was Axie. And now we move on and we see that the real next wave will be driven and probably front run by user adoption and then hopefully followed on by validation. I think that would be the healthy thing. But going back to this framework, you had 4 things that you outlined on this framework that need to happen for this next wave of gaming to take place. And this is definitely a great framework. So the first thing you said was user onboarding, and that needs to be seamless. Developer experience, a business model, one that I hadn't heard quite spoken to, but is super, super smart. And actually, I think really, really necessary to define. And then finally, a hit or content. So why don't we walk through those and let's get a checkup on where we're at. So first of all, user onboarding. Where are we at with user onboarding?
So I think we were at a pretty poor place even up to 6 months ago. The problem with user onboarding is the vast majority of games compete on 3 metrics. Customer acquisition cost, how cheaply can you acquire a customer into your game? Retention, once they play your game, how frequently do they come back? And third, monetization, how much do they spend compared to how long they spend in the game? And the entire game's success can be driven by these 3 metrics. Games are very similar nowadays. So the majority of differentiation occurs at either the retention or monetization layer. And you just have to be good at customer acquisition cost. This is a must-have. If you can't acquire customers cheaply into your game, you'll not be able to compete. Especially for mobile games, especially for games with high player bases, you can have more hardcore games with high monetization. But typically, this is the most important thing. Now, imagine you're acquiring a Web2 gamer, especially a casual gamer who is used to seeing an ad, downloading the game, and if they don't like it in the first 5 minutes, they are typically churning. Like the most important first impression is the first 2 to 3 minutes of a game. Justin Waldron from Zynga used to say that he would spend half a game's prototype budget on the first 3-minute slice of a game because that was the most important thing. Could you get people to basically stick around for those first 3 minutes. Now, imagine you get them to sign up to a wallet-like experience where they have to learn or memorize 24 seed words. They have to learn what NFTs are. They have to switch off the application into some sort of web browser, let alone switch from their device to a desktop in order to sign up. You're literally losing 99.9% of your users. So you're increasing your customer acquisition costs by 100 to 1,000 times. Our solution is very simple. We want to create a completely invisible user experience for gamers where they can transact, they can create a wallet, and they can receive assets without even knowing it's Web3 under the hood, all while satisfying 2 really important conditions. 1, it's self-custodial, and 2, the funds you deposit into that wallet can be used anywhere. And I think that's really critical because there's a few solutions today which are creating invisible wallet experiences, but the trade-off they're making is a single system MPC, so a key in the cloud that is technically the user's legal self-custody. But in order to generate things like invisible signing transactions, so in order to create a good end user experience, they're giving elevated privileges to that game. That means they can't use the same wallet and the same funds for any other game. Otherwise, that game could transact on these games' behalf. And that's a big problem, right? Because you're not building network value or you're not building frictionless experience as users on board. It's like, imagine you are in the App Store and every single time you want to pay for a new in-app transaction in a new game, you have to re-register your credit card, you have to re-KYC with Apple, and you have to deposit new funds.
Like, never going to happen. Never going to happen.
Exactly. And that's what we're asking people to do with the best solutions in market today for invisible wallet experiences. So I'm really thrilled to share the updates on Passport, which is basically a mutables wallet that is completely self-custodial, where you have completely invisible signing. This is fully supported on mobile today. You can basically have users fuse assets, merge assets, receive, trade without even clicking a Web3 transaction. But the most important thing is because we have a co-signatory in every transaction being a mutable guardian, which is basically a heuristic-based model where you can set permissions. So you can say, hey, I want this game, Illuvium, to be able to merge up to $50 of assets, or to be able to mint up to X or Y dollars, or to trade up to X or Y dollars. And so you delegate permissions. You can actually restrict those permissions and only make sure that game can transact for that game, which means you deposit funds into this wallet once, you can use them on any game on any rollup. And this is a part of our whole thesis of reducing liquidity fragmentation, which I think is one of the least attended to issues in Web3 today. All that summarizes into immutable Passport currently converts 300 to 500% better than your conventional wallet today. We expect we can get this up to 10 to 20 times better converting for Web2 mainstream users when we start to onboard them. And the way we've done it is in an architecture that doesn't compromise on security or custody. I encourage anyone to try it. You can go to, I believe it is passport.immutable.com. Please give us your feedback. But this will be embedded in pretty much every game. I think it just rolled out with Aqua and Token Trove, and nearly 100% of the games that are going to be all today will be using Passport.
Okay, Robbie, I'm going to be real. The technicals sound good, but let's get to the real question here, which is we want to know when the hits are coming. We want to know when the heat and the excitement's coming. So I think we should talk about this together, which is you said this at the beginning, like there's a monster amount of money that's still being sunk into Web3. When do you think we're going to see this breakout moment? Because all of this tech under the hood obviously means nothing without that hit. And so you talked about 2 things here that I think we really want to understand, which for us, the investor, the bag holder, this is what affects us, which is when are people going to notice us? You know, when are people going to care? And I think it comes down to that hit, which is obviously a product of all these things. But what do you think that hit's going to, you mentioned in the next 12 months, give us a little more color on that. And also, what do you think is like the model here? And is it that different than what people are expecting? You know, is it really drastically different? Or is this just a matter of the models will all work depending on if there's good content?
Both great questions, Elliot. I think so. Timelines to a hit, I would say I have very high confidence there are going to be at least 2 or 3 hits next year, and that's just based off there are 30 more web times the number of Web3 games going live next year than there were at any time in history, essentially, and that's because all of the funding for games 2 to 3 years ago are now going live. Some of these timelines will slip. I can't guarantee any individual game's timelines. But across the portfolio, the reason we try relentlessly for market share is you need an enormous amount of games in order to guarantee hits. Gaming is entirely power law driven. it's going to feel like nothing until you have one game which does more volume than everything else combined. And this is exactly, honestly, how the last bull run or the last, when Axie took off, felt, where it was silent until suddenly it was pretty overwhelming. That's the exact same thing we're going to see with the game. As soon as they hit fail coefficient above 1, efficient, CAC to LTV ratio, and they can profitably scale to millions of users, we're going to very, very quickly see this thesis change. The difference between games and DeFi is games take time to build. DeFi, when you had this funding rounds, you could have Andre Cronje releasing in production 1 to 2 months later. And I want to give a bit of concreteness to this because it's easy for me to say there's games coming out next year and there's going to be hits. But of the 200 building on our platform today, nearly over half, we estimate, will be going live next year. To give you just a glimpse, and these are well-funded games, right? We have thousands building on the long tail that we don't even talk to. But just to give you a quick glimpse at some of the ones going live over the next literally 4, 5, 6 months. We have Space Nation, which is a MMORPG with tens of millions of dollars of funding based out of China. That's going live and on Immutable halfway through next year. We have MetaX Dark Machine, which is a FPS-based game, team-based, similar to Counter-Strike style monetization, going live in out of Japan mid next year. We have Mythic Protocol Riftstorm. This is a roguelite shooter. So think Diablo, but with guns. Exceptional team based out of Indonesia. I'm really a fan of this game. I was playtesting a couple months ago. This is going live in, I think, 2 or 3 months. The game is basically fully done. We have Simwin Sports, which is a huge fantasy sports game. Think like DraftKings, FanDuel, but with Web3 incorporated, going live in the next few months. We have, and these are obviously our timelines. These could shade are exactly up to date, but this is broadly our information. Metatoy Dragon Z, a game out of South Korea. The team behind this game has literally the number 1, number 6, and number 7 games today on the Korean App Store, Google Play. And they're launching this in the end of this year. You have Krafton building a Roblox competitor built on Web3 with hundreds of millions of dollars in budget pointed towards this. A $5 billion public company based out of South Korea. You have Nexon, one of South Korea's largest gaming studios, putting one of their flagship IPs, MapleStory, on Web3. You have
and Robbie, are these all on Immutable?
Everything except for.
Are you just giving us a full rounded view here of all Web3 gaming?
No, actually, those are all mostly on Immutable. Yes, Crafton and Nexon are not today, but we're always working on things. But yes, all these ones I'm reading out are on Immutable. Battle Derby is a kart racer that's Web3 based out of Spain, going live in the next few months. Metakey New Ganymede, which is DC Investors MMORPG, going live very soon. We have Infinite Victory and Shardbound. Infinite Victory, a 3v3 Rocket League, but say for basketball. Shardbound, a spatial TCG trading card game, which had hundreds of thousands of players in the Web 2 variants. LJFA Football Manager, Evermoon MOBA out of Japan. We have Block Lords, which is a 4X strategy game. Guild of Guardians, this is personally one I'm incredibly excited about. This is one we wholly own and publish. And we just saw, I don't know if you're familiar with the stats for a good game, world-class games. Day 1 retention, you typically want 40%. Day 7 retention, around 20%. And that means you can typically very profitably scale a game if you're hitting those rough numbers, as long as the game makes enough money. But that's like, the game is sticky. People want to play it. We've just done an early friends and family beta, so 500 people. So you expect a little bit of inflated results. But our day 1 was 67%. And our day 7 was above 46%. So literally the day 7 was the equivalent to day 1 retention. Even when you counter in the inflation you get from a small cohort, these are very, very good results. So I'm incredibly excited about Guild of Guardian. The full mainnet launch is going to be end of Q1 next year. And we're going to have many beta tests before that. Galaxy Commander, strategy game, Eyeball Pool, coming out Q1 next year. Across the Ages, number 1 strategy game in France of this year. I think they spent half of this year as that category.
Okay, Robbie, I get that you could keep going, and I have to cut you off here because you made your point. You made your point.
Well, I want to give credibility to this, right? Because it's easy to sit here and say, trust us, Web3 gaming you're going to have hits this year.
Rah, lots of games,
yeah. Exactly. The reason we're investing so hard, the reason we have a 100-person go-to-market team is like, we know this is basically going to be a seismic shift, and the first hits are going to come out next year. And after that, it's literally pouring gasoline on everything. Because what we saw last time, and this goes into your business model question, is as soon as you have a hit, people copy that business model. happened with Mafia Wars out of Zynga, social game. They cloned that thing into 30 different games, hair salon games for little kids. It happened with Axie Infinity. You had Stepin, you had all sorts of move to earn, share to earn things. And that's unfortunately why, because they copied that model, you had not much success with them because their economic playbooks failed. And also the platform and user onboarding wasn't really there either. And our goal is to make sure we have strong enough opinions and we are guiding these economies in the right way that the next hit is going to be a fundamentally sustainable economy that simplifies the job for everyone. Because people should not have to, in order to build on Web3, have to hire a PhD economist or a smart contract engineer. That is absurd. It's like saying you have to, hire a specialist person who understands from scratch how to build a economy in order to build a successful gacha game. You can actually typically just copy most of these things. Of course, you have game designers tweaking and modeling these things, but going 0 to 1 should be the industry works on that as a problem, and then that is open source information everyone can use. And that's why we do Immutable Studios. That's why we work so hard on building this IP, so we know how to share this with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely first of all, I appreciate you bringing credibility here. And that is really important because a lot of people, I think, feel just this sense of that they've heard this all before, but they just don't understand quite the time scale that gaming plays out on. And this is also true, as you see, of people with crypto cycles. They know there's a 4-year cycle roughly, but by year 2.5 or 3, they give up because they're like, screw this. This has just been too many fake outs, even though the plan hasn't really changed. And we see now at least what appears to be things starting to feel like they're repeating history again, especially you've been here for several
It's really
cycles.
hard unless you've lived through those cycles before. It feels terrible, right? If you're in this market and you're like, everything is down 99, 95%. That's why at Immutable, we never focus on crypto prices with our company. In fact, look, I much prefer bear runs for building, quite candidly, but we tell everyone in the peak of the bull run, this is not going to last. The most important thing is how many users are we onboarding? How many real traders or real value are we giving to players that didn't own that before? And that means they have these consistency in metrics. It's also partially the reason we did gaming. Like, this is not, the gaming assets we're doing are not down 95% as NFTs. They are utility-based assets people want to trade, right? And that is the most important thing to me, is fundamental value proposition versus speculation.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I want to bring this back because, look, as an Immutable investor and a token holder, obviously this is exciting. Oh, they got all the games. But let's be honest, like, it's going to be a graveyard of games out there. And we know that. And we know that's what makes this particular movement so hard. So, like, what would you say to someone going, well, how do you know that that's going to work out for you guys if you're investing all your resources in all these games, bringing them to market, such a big team? Like, how do you know you're not spending your effort in the wrong place, I guess?
It's a great question. I actually think we have a really clever approach to this. We've thought about it very deeply. We do 2 things. First of all, we have an internal VC team, essentially. This is called the Acceleration and Deals team. They look at every single game in the market. We literally have, like, we see a game being announced and I always pass it in. They're like, oh yeah, we already have this tracked. I'll be like, don't worry. But they analyze every game and they basically rank it from common, uncommon, rare, epic, legendary in terms of the likelihood we think it will be of being a hit. And the goal of this, and we base that off a few things. We base it off game design, we base it off team and previous successes, which I think is the most important thing. Time to market, we're strongly prioritizing games going live in the next 12 months. The Web3 expertise of these games, and then the level of funding that they've achieved as well. I'm sure if a game is $50 million of funding, it's obviously going to be a higher signal. And off this, we basically prioritize, well, how hard should we go after them? So our BDs are comped actually differently based on each of these priorities. And we run much more of a typical enterprise sales motion. We really care about understanding the technical requirements and saying, this is exactly why Immutable can be a fit for you. But second, when we recommend grant amounts to the foundation, we actually use this to say, here's how much we think they should be given in order to incentivize adoption. Obviously, every blockchain, every platform is writing grants. But the fundamental difference between the foundation for IMX's grants and everyone else is we don't just give them out and dump them. Every single grant we write is only given out if they achieve volume milestones on the protocol, which essentially drives real utility and fees to IMX. And that means essentially only the winners are getting these tokens. And the games love it because they know that the value is not going to be destroyed by it being given out willy-nilly. Like these huge new L1s with massive supply overhangs, who are going to have different things happen in the next couple of years based on those supplies unlocking. But B, it means that we can essentially underwrite the entire success of the protocol. So currently there's 1.1 billion tokens out of 2 billion hard capped allocated to ecosystem grants. Out of the 20% we've allocated so far, roughly 180 million, in order for them to even ever be given out, $12 billion of protocol volume has to be achieved, which is $250 million in fees, which will likely be recurring. So the way we've structured this makes it much harder for our BDs. The reason we're able to do this is we have a much stronger product market fit. We have a much stronger go-to-market team. People are very bullish on Immutable and the ecosystem. It's definitely not easy. Like, competitors have tried this and they haven't been able to do it because they simply don't have the kind of products needed for games. But it means we're not spending resources unnecessarily. And you're kind of right, which is in bull runs, it's actually incredibly hard to tell whether people are here for legitimate reasons or they're seeking funding. And you have to take the bet. You have to bring them on board the platform. But this system allows us to know, hey, if they're taking this, they're probably in it for the long run. And they're probably heavily incentivized to contribute real value.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, let's just break down what you said, which is, if I could summarize, they have to succeed at a certain level to unlock the token. So you're pledging tokens. Your model is that you're giving out tokens only to winners, right? So you're essentially setting up.
It is literally profitable for the foundation, to give out tokens right now. Like, no new supply hits the market from those ecosystem grants unless games are massive winners and drive way more volume than they're getting back to the protocol.
So it's a pretty good deal for you guys, and it's a fairly risky deal for the games, which effectively inverts the pyramid of risk for you guys, right? Effectively you're not taking all the risk.
I think it's incentive alignment for the games, right? So these games, when they're winners, now get a meaningful piece of the pie. They're ecosystem aligned, and these games are always optimistic about what they can achieve, and I think that's fairly so, right? These are incredible founders building games. Is a risky business, and we have to protect the tokens that we're giving to them and to everyone.
Yeah, makes total sense. All right, well, digging further into Immutable, obviously you guys had a massive announcement, and one that I only really started to fully digest recently, which is effectively you guys fused with Polygon in so many ways, but I'm not actually sure. I know you guys now have the ZK EVM and you have stackable app chain. So effectively, the simple way to put this is, if my game, or the game I'm working on here that I founded, Imposters, goes on to have 100 million players, we could have our own chain that could never be clogged by anyone else, and there could be versions of that for every game that is built on Immutable. And effectively that's your way of sort of scaling horizontally, right? If to simply put it, is every game can have its own chain, and that's the net effect. How does that work with Polygon and Immutable from like a token perspective? How does that break down? And you don't have to go too deep, but just give me a sense of, like, is it joint? Is it, how does it work?
Yeah. So first off, the beautiful thing about this partnership is that our layers of monetization and the layers of the stack are completely compatible. It's almost as if Stripe and AWS were competing for gaming for some reason, and they each had 40% of the market, and they decided to combine efforts. There's no competition there. They're completely complementary layers of the stack. And that effectively was what it was for Polygon and Immutable. And at the end of the last year, we both had roughly 40% market share or 35% market share for all Web3 games in existence. We both had $1 billion invested into games building on our platform last year. Between us, 2/3 of every Web3 game investment was on one of our platforms. And so it was just ridiculous competition, right? Because we're in market together, we're competing on grants, we're competing on deals, and there's no reason we can't just simplify this choice for developers. There is already enough decision fatigue, people building in Web3 gaming, to say, hey, what platform you're going to build on, what blockchain is yet another. And the fact that it's built on Ethereum, secured by ZK rollups, makes me very philosophically aligned. It would have been very difficult to do on prior because all of Polygon's offerings were POS, but now they have by far the best ZK tech in market. They went and bought 3 teams 2 years ago for $1 billion in what I think is one of the most successful examples of M&A in the space. So the beauty of this partnership is we've essentially completely unified on this go-to-market for gaming. And since then, our win rate has jumped from 36 to above 65%. And that includes deals which aren't lost to competitors. They're lost because they're just waiting till next quarter to decide. So our cumulative win rate is closer to 70 to 75%. We've onboarded over 90 well-funded games simply since the partnership. We're now above 200. So things have essentially exploded on the deal side. And the most important thing is being able to significantly strategically consolidate a lot of these other layers of the stack. I can't share exactly news yet, but a lot of the beauty of the bear market is in a bull market, everyone can raise infinite funds and basically build their own castle. We're building every layer of the stack, the wallet, the blockchain, the platform, the SDKs, etc. Now people are trying to reduce costs and figure out exactly where they want to play. And this is a huge opportunity for Immutable Polygon to basically bring this entire ecosystem onto us. And so with Upchains, the actual precise tokenomics is obviously Polygon is going to be used as the this economic bandwidth for staking of all these chains. And actually, we even have the option for dual staking with IMX, which is phenomenal. IMX is able to become the gas currency of all those networks. But of course, the fundamental utility, which is that 20% of every trade fee must be paid for in IMX, is used not just across now Immutable X, but Immutable ZK EVM and all of these app chains. So we get to massively upgrade utility, bring on board Polygon's monetization in a completely complementary way, and add on things like dual staking, which we never even had before. So I think the partnership has been a really effective one. I'm huge fans of the Poly team, and more importantly, I think it's been really good for game developers.
I mean, in layman's terms, you effectively become the marketplace layer, right? For every game on this platform. Is that what you're saying? Because then, I mean, 20%, it's roughly, that's obviously much more significant than 2.5% at OpenSea. But effectively, if there's trading volume...
Sorry, that 20% is of the 2%.
Got it.
And that's the protocol fee. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's net 40 bips. Yeah.
I mean, obviously at scale, that would be good. That'd be very good. That's exciting. And I get it now that the trade-offs between the partnership, it sounds like that's I mean, obviously it's an exciting mashup of logos, but then when you break it down, you're like, wait, who's winning here? Is some ways one side winning? It sounds like, if possible, it's a win-win. All right. I'm going to be real. We need to shift gears here because you slipped me a note before this interview that I guess you're ready to reveal now. I did not know anything about this, but you guys have what I can only assume is a pretty big piece of news to break. What is this this headline you just dropped on me, and what does it mean?
Absolutely. So Immutable is teaming up with Ubisoft to build decentralized Web3 experiences. I can't share more yet, but more will be shared very soon.
Come on, Robbie. You're teaming up with Ubisoft, right? One of the bigger game studios in the world. I don't even know if that's the right description, but obviously everybody knows Ubisoft. What does that mean? Game Web3 experiences. Is that a game? Is that a metaverse? Is that, obviously you have your technology. What does that mean?
Well, look, we're a Web3 gaming platform. So look, I can't speak to more till the next stage where we're giving more details. But we're really, really excited to be on this journey with Ubisoft. They're an incredible team, and hopefully we can build something that's really exceptional together.
You're leaving a cliffhanger so you can come back on the show. I know it. But anyway, all right, man. This has been awesome. I appreciate the deep dive and you going in and validating some of the more nitty gritty details, because in the end, like, you can describe a color, you can describe a thing and an emotion, but to actually go in and show the building blocks, I think is really key. And so I appreciate you doing that. What are your sort of final words of, I guess, wisdom or just in general, something you want to talk to the audience about, who are probably sitting patiently excited? I know if they're watching my channel, they probably share my emotion of we're all rooting for this. We all want to cheer for this movement because it seems so big. What would you say to the audience?
Yeah, first of all, I'd say if you're here, you're incredibly early, and the work that we're doing really matters. This is not just another, commercial investment or exercise. Literally, we are talking about how will people own property in the future. Gaming is the precursor to pretty much every form of unique value being tokenized. People will live their entire lives in virtual or augmented realities in the future, and that can either be on an incredibly centralized database where people are exploited, or we can build something that is truly ownable and truly decentralized on Ethereum. And so that's why I'm fundamentally here. It's why I'm still working as hard as ever, 6 years in, and we have a long journey ahead of us. But the second thing I would say is just I'm very proud of the team and where we've come over the last 2 years. I think since we've entered this bear run, we've had by far the biggest progress, not only in the product side, we've invested into things like cross-roll-up liquidity, we've invested into things like the best user experience on onboarding, best compliance. But now it's to the point where, I've spent the last 2 months traveling Asia and the US. And two things I would say stand out. One, every VC is like, well, we have our category risk and assessment on Web3 gaming. But if we are bullish on, to the extent we want to be allocated to Web3 gaming or be bullish on that, Immutable is essentially the blue chip. It's the way to get exposure. So I think we've come a long way in now becoming the default platform for Web3 games. And I think that means we can focus much more on the game expertise and evidence. But the second thing I would say is you are probably, if you're listening to this in a Western audience, in a Western media, there is a massive disjunct right now between the West and the rest of Asia in terms of Web3 gaming. You literally have the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida saying Web3 is the new form of capitalism. You have Mitsubishi Group and some of the biggest sovereign funds in Japan investing into Web3 gaming. You have in Korea, 10 of the 15 largest game studios all building active Web3 games or experiences. So I think there's just this exceptional opportunity right now in these markets where typically Korean and Japanese studios have been at the helm of the free-to-play shift. They've been at the helm of the social shift. And so they're not hedging like more Western studios, where they're saying, well, when this inevitably is successful, we want to make sure we know how it works. We've had a few irons in the fire. We know who to acquire. They're like, we're ready to lead and make sure that we can define what the first successful hits look like and actually embrace this new technology. So I found that incredibly exciting. Obviously, from a regulatory perspective, it's much more in the clear. So I'm definitely feeling even very different to 6 months ago. And I think it's now a matter of time until we have these hits.
All right, Robbie, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for sharing your background, your experience, and all the updates with Immutable. We look forward to having you back on soon.
Of course, Elliot, a pleasure.
Well, there you have it. Hundreds of games coming to Web3, an astounding amount of already successful game creators. It's only a matter of time here before Web3 gaming gets its breakout moment, when users are legitimately playing and trading assets within a robust game ecosystem, and it's not just about a 4-year cyclical bull run. This is what the future looks like, and I couldn't be more excited to be watching it all take shape with you all. And one thing's very clear, it's still so early. If you guys are loving the gaming content here, now that we're back into the thick of it, closer to the good part of the cycle than the bad, then you know what to do. Destroy that like button. Of course, a big thank you to Robbie from Immutable for joining as guest. Let me know in the comments who else you want to see on the channel. Whose opinion do you want to hear from about crypto gaming? As always, I'm EllioTrades, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.